Welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today we're kind of in a little bit of we're kind of in purgatory for the regular season, right? Preseason just ended, not a whole lot to work off of in terms of analysis for film heading into the Saints game. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of have our annual. We're going to make this probably an annual thing. It's going to be like an annual prediction show, right? We're going to do we're going to talk a little bit about our expectations for each positional group. And we'll talk about some individuals within those groups as well. The goal being more to be, I guess. I don't find value in being specific with rushing numbers, for example. I think that it's better for us to talk about the running back depth chart as a whole as opposed to what Dalvin Cook's rookie numbers will be. I think that simply has more value in terms of creating perspective for this season. So that's something we'll talk about today. We'll also go through our NFL standings. Part of the reason why we're doing this is because, there's a lot of really good teams in the NFC this year. The Vikings are going to be competing not just against Detroit and Green Bay within their division, but teams like Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Carolina, even New Orleans potentially as well. You can look out east. New York and Dallas should be very good as well. So we'll break down briefly each one of those, how those standings are going to shape out in our opinions, and then we'll finish up with some bold takes for the season, some real fire coming at you at the end of the show here. Mm-hmm. So let's get the word from our sponsor right out of the way here, and then we'll just jump right into the show and kind of see how this thing goes. Black Stack Brewing, brand new brewery smack dab in the middle of Minneapolis and St. Paul with a wide range of clean and flavorful brews and a massive bright tap room, perfect for intimate settings all the way to special events. That's Black Stack Brewing, 755 North Pryor, just north of Menards off of University. And then shout out to our sponsors over the Twin Cities Directory, the best way to explore delicious bites and fun-filled nights that Minneapolis and St. Paul have to offer. Check it out at www.twincities.directory. That's www.twincities.directory, helping you discover the real Twin Cities. All right, Drew, so like I just kind of explained during the intro here, during our agenda, let's start off here with the offense. The quarterback position it's very individual, right? So talking about the group, the numbers that Sam Bradford and Case Keenum are going to put up combined doesn't really work for this position group, because I think both of us are expecting 16 games from Bradford here. So break down for me what you think Sam Bradford's year is going to look like from a statistical standpoint, and give me some reasoning as to why you think that way.
It's going to be similar to last year. I don't really see much of a change there. I mean, obviously there's a better, I assume, offensive line, a better protection, and a better rushing attack with Dalvin Cook, Latavius Murray. That should come with it. So I think the better ground game will help him be slightly more efficient, and I take the yards per attempt should go up.
Yeah.
In that, he's not dumping it down and trying to do the entire offense all by himself, run the entire offense by himself, and kind of methodically make the way down the field. So I think there'll be far more shots down the field. I think statistically the touchdown interception ratio, relatively speaking, is yards. He'll be right around 4,000 yards, I'm sure. And I think that touchdown interception ratio will be similar. So his performance will be relatively the same as last season, and I think it'll be viewed differently though. I think with the Vikings maybe winning more games, I think the better success of the offense as a whole, what I presume will be anyway, I think his performance will be perceived to be better, even though I think it'll be roughly the same as last season.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think that it might be a little bit better than last year, at least from a statistical standpoint, but in terms of efficiency, which is really, Jason Brown, I'm sure you can testify to this. Efficiency statistics are the real way to go here. I mean, volume numbers are fun for fantasy football, but in terms of trying to predict or project or simply understand what's going on in terms of overall success, it's the efficiency numbers that are really important, the yards per attempt and stuff like that. So Sam Bradford last year, not great yards per attempt. I believe 7.0 was his number, breaking the completion record. I think when he broke Drew Brees' record, I think Brees was hitting at like 8.2 yards per attempt. When he reset the record.
There's a big difference.
A pretty significant difference, yeah. So I don't expect that to change a whole lot. I simply expect that Sam Bradford is going to be more comfortable this year. I think that's, it sounds like an obvious statement simply because the offensive line is going to be improved, but I think it really speaks to, the amount of time that he's had this offseason to actually prepare for this year as opposed to last year. I really think that's going to make a difference for Sam Bradford. I think he's going to play 16 games this year instead of 15. Last year, if he had played 16, we probably would have saw him go over 4,000 yards. It probably would have been very close to about 25 touchdowns, right in that 22 to 24 range, which I could see pretty close to the same type of thing this year from Sam Bradford. Maybe, again, I just said that individual volume statistics are probably not a great way to actually grasp what's going on, but I'd say probably right around 4,200 yards, 25 to 28 touchdowns for Sam Bradford this year. Just an overall more effective, more efficient offensive performance throughout the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, and people want to look at his preseason performance and a lack of deep shots downfield and this and that, and I will never buy into preseason meaning that much, because if you want, you can look at it however you want statistically, or you can watch the film, whatever you want to do. It just doesn't translate. It rarely does stuff translate smoothly from what you see in preseason to what you see in the regular season, because we've talked about this before. Teams aren't running out their full, they're not using their full playbook. They're running basic sets to find out basic traits from players as to how they execute things, and then from there they kind of open up the playbook and insert some sets and stuff. So
they're more
don't
specific.
take away.
It's more specific during the actual regular season. They're game planning for an actual opponent. Right.
So don't look at the preseason and take it as the end-all, be-all conclusion of what the team will be. Or even close to that. It's literally just a way to get accustomed to playing with certain guys and wearing the uniform again, that type of thing. That's really all it is. So this is week one's completely different. You're playing, the games mean something. The team will game plan for the Saints. The team will game plan for whatever their opponent is throughout the season. So I don't expect any woes that were in the preseason to continue. So I think Sam Bradford will play as he did last year. And it will be, he'll be perceived better, but I think, like I said, his overall performance should be about the same, because I think he's kind of reached his peak. I will say that, as many people have that are kind of the Bradford doubters, but I think his peak is still really good. So
yeah, it's certainly good enough to win football games, to advance this team to the postseason this year, which is something that we'll be talking about later on in the show here. Let's move on to the running back position now. A lot more interesting than the quarterback position in terms of overall numbers. Obviously, you've got three guys who could compile a variety of different statistics. I mean, you think about Dalvin Cook being your featured back. He's going to be getting both rushing and receiving yards. You think about Latavius Murray potentially being a goal line back as well as a third down in protection back. He's going to put up some touchdowns. He's also going to put up some reception numbers. Then you got Jerick McKinnon, who looks to be the kick return guy. So he's going to be putting up some numbers as a kick returner. Probably nowhere near the Cordero Patterson stuff. But the fact of the matter is here, this trio of running backs is extremely versatile. It's extremely flexible. They can do all kinds of fun stuff with them, and the all-purpose numbers should be a lot of fun this year, in my opinion. So let's start with overall efficiency. What are you expecting from Dalvin Cook and Latavius Murray, that tandem, in terms of efficiency numbers, and just improving this running game from being, the shithole that it was last year?
I think it's very realistic that the rushing attack from the team as a whole improves by a total, like a complete yard per carry, 1 yard per carry.
Oh yeah.
And that's mostly, has to do with how poor it was last season. I think it was like 3.3 or 3.4 yards per carry or something like that. But I think 4.4 yards per carry for the team is very realistic. Given you brought in Reef and Remmers, who are both run maulers. You can say what you want about Remmers as a pass protector, but he is really, really good blocking against the run, or for the run. And then, you bring in Dalvin Cook, who's clearly super talented, and he can do all kinds of different things. He has that breakaway speed, that get to the corner or get to the edge type of speed. Latavius Murray, he's not a breakaway player. He's not going to bust your 90-yard touchdown, but he knows how to grind out yards. He's a big back. So that tandem alone, I think, is obviously a huge step up from last season. And then Jerick McKinnon, too, is a kind of a change of pace guy. You have a lot of different things to work with here. I mean, as a trio, there are a few better than the Vikings. in terms of experience and production and talent, I think, overall. So there's a lot to be excited about there. If the running blocking is substantially better, this could be a really good trio and this a really good rushing attack altogether.
Yeah, this could be the Adrian Peterson was essentially a one-man wrecking crew his entire career in Minnesota, right? I mean, if you think about from a fantasy football perspective, you were never afraid of anyone stealing Adrian Peterson's carries while he's with the Vikings. Now we've got a very interesting scenario. We talked about on the Vikings the Vikings Territory roundtable today about how Adrian Peterson, when he came into the league, he obviously had to make his way through Chester Taylor first. He actually started his career as a kick return guy, and his first, I've said this a million times, his first touchdown was a receiving touchdown. So I think we're going to see a little bit of that. I think that Dalvin Cook is still going to be the featured back. I think that he's the guy that you want in fantasy football, for example, if that's, I don't think that's probably not why you're listening to this show, because I'm not really a guru in that regard, but I still think that that's the guy that you want for your fantasy football team. And I think Dalvin Cook is going to be an extremely effective runner, and I got to give credit to Adam Warwis here. He said that he's probably the perfect partner in crime to the check down Charlie style that Sam Bradford has been running. So I'm really excited about what Dalvin Cook is going to offer. I think the reception numbers could be in the 30s, potentially into the 40s, simply because I think he's going to get a ton of touches. And I could see him being close to about 1,500 all-purpose yards this season. That's kind of one of my bolder takes, I guess. But I'm really excited about this running back trio. I really think you could do a whole lot with them. I think you could play all three of them on the field at the same time if you wanted to, because in theory you could split both Dalvin Cook or Jerick McKinnon or both out wide, and then have Latavius Murray in the backfield as your rusher. So there's a lot of fun stuff that Shurmur can do, and especially you bring in Blake Bell now. That heavy package is going to be three mammoth human beings in Kyle Rudolph, Blake Bell, and David Morgan. Running out of the heavy set and running at the goal line should be a lot better this year. Situational football at the running back position will be drastically improved, I think.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that was an issue that the Vikings went out and tried to fix. Those third and short situations with Matt Asiata. Not great last season. I think that's putting it lightly. So they brought in Latavius Murray. They brought in Dalvin Cook, he's got some bulk and some power to him as well. And then they brought in Mike Grimmers, huge body. Riley Reef, huge body. Blake Bell, huge body. All these guys, and David Morgan, assuming is healthy, another big body that can block. So that in itself should be more efficient. And then I also want to add that given the way things went in camp and preseason, and Latavius Murray's injury kind of taking a little bit longer to recover from, it does appear that Cook has earned the workhorse tag. So while Murray will obviously get his complimentary touches, and I think he'll probably be thrown in there on short yardage situations, Cook is going to be the guy that gets 70+% of the touches from the running back position. So it's going to be a big year for Cook. We talked on the round table comparing the rookie season to Adrian Peterson. That might be a stretch, but he'll be very productive, I think.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Let's move on to the wide receiver position now. Another really fun group to this. It's an extremely intriguing group of wide receivers. You've got Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen at the top, who could both go over 1,000 yards. You got Michael Floyd and Laquan Treadwell, who could both be red zone warriors. You got Jarius Wright, who you never really know what to expect at this point. You got Stacy Coley at the back end with Rodney Adams, who offer a lot of upside and also a lot of probably rookie mistakes at the same time. So this is an intriguing seven-man crew if you consider Michael Floyd as well. I really like this unit. I think it's going to be, let's get this out of the way real quick. Are the Vikings going to get an 1,000-yard receiver for the first time since my boy Sidney Rice in 2009 this year?
Yep, absolutely. They will. And it's not going to be Stephon Diggs. It'll be Adam Thielen. That's one of my hot takes. I think he emerges as wide receiver one. He and Bradford built a really good rapport towards the end of last season. And now Thielen is moving into the slot where his targets will only go up. It appears as if Diggs is moving outside. And that might be part of saving Diggs' health, that could be part of it. Keeping him outside of the middle of the field, keeping him more in open space. So I think Thielen, if he stays healthy, will be not just 1,000 yards, but I've said this on the round table. It's my number one hot take for the season. He will surpass 1,200 receiving yards this season. So I think that's the receiver to have in fantasy this season. Not to say Diggs won't be productive, but I think Thielen steps up. And then I do think I have another hot take at the receiver position too, but I'll let you have the floor here before I share that one.
I want to ask you this before we move on to Diggs and the rest of the receiving group. Do you see Thielen emerging as the number one receiver as a result of a Stephon Diggs injury, or do you believe that he represents a higher level of potential heading into this year?
A little bit of both. I've always kind of seen Diggs as a really, really good wide receiver too, because it seems as if when he does go up against these elite cornerbacks in the past,
bigger cornerbacks too.
Bigger ones, yeah, more physical players. He has been washed out a little bit. So
Richard Sherman has his number. Patrick Peterson has his number.
I think Thielen is at least more equipped to have success against those guys, those type of cornerbacks. So I think he's more equipped to become a number one guy. But I mean, I do think a Diggs injury, missing a couple games, is certainly a possibility as well, and that could also play into it.
Okay, so let's combine Diggs and Thielen here as opposed to individually. How many yards do those two combine for as your starting wide receivers? How many yards do those two combine for this year?
2,100 yards. I'll say that. So I think Diggs will repeat last season.
About 900.
Yeah, because a lot. He too was out of the slot last season, so he got a lot more targets than maybe he should have. So I think Thielen will take those, and he's going to be the one to see the big increase.
I think that you're right in the neighborhood there. I think that we're looking at probably about 2,000 yards for the combination of the two. I still think that Stephon Diggs is going to be the guy this year. I've got a lot of confidence in him. It's just a matter of staying healthy, in my opinion, which is why I asked you that question about his durability. Those concerns are still very real. Obviously, Diggs was able to put together a great summer from a durability standpoint, but once you get out on the field, it's a whole different game. He could get, knock on wood, but he's the type of guy that always has that lingering hamstring injury or something like that just disrupts his, a breakout type season. I think you could make an argument that, Stephon Diggs broke out last year, but it was kind of a tempered breakout because of the injury. So I think, honestly, he's probably a breakout candidate still, just because he had a great year last year, but he didn't realize his full potential. I think that we could still see...
he was on pace for 100-plus catches and over 1,000 yards if he had stayed healthy for the entire season. So
the real difference between him and Thielen, in my opinion, is going to come in the red zone, the touchdowns. I think that we saw last year, Thielen had 5 touchdowns. I think Diggs had 3. I expect more of the same. Treadwell and Floyd are probably a really big part of that as well. Let's talk about touchdowns now. How many touchdowns? Let's say Sam Bradford hypothetically throws 25 touchdowns. How many of those are going to receivers this year?
I'll say if he throws 25 is a good number. I'll say he throws 15 to receivers.
And who's the leader then?
I'll give Thielen 7 of them.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and then we'll give Diggs probably 5, and then the rest of them kind of dispersed, because I think we'll go Diggs 4. I'll give Floyd a couple, Treadwell 1, maybe something like that.
I think that you could see a pretty interesting disparity here. Obviously, the tight end position is up next on our docket here, and that's going to be influential as in all of these categories, receiving yards, touchdowns, all that kind of stuff. I think that you're probably going to see Thielen be the leading receiver. I don't think he's going to score the most touchdowns as a receiver. I think that's probably going to be Kyle Rudolph, which is something we'll get to at the next slot here. But I think that it's going to be like Thielen and then basically everybody else like mushed together, because I see Treadwell and Floyd both being situational players in the red zone that could probably rack up 4 touchdowns apiece. Stephon Diggs, like I said, isn't really a guy that scores his touchdowns from up close. He's normally a guy that breaks off the 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns. So I see him getting like 3 or 4 again. He's not a scoring receiver, and that's not necessarily a knock on him. is so long as you have
I
other
think
options.
they have other weapons that are more equipped for red zone production than Diggs is. So
Right. So since we already started talking about, let's just move right into the tight end position there. Kyle Rudolph, David Morgan, and the new guy Blake Bell. How many touchdowns do the three of them combine for this year?
I'll go 8 because I gave 15 of those 25 to the receivers. I'll go 8 to the tight ends. I'll give Rudolph 7. I'll give Morgan 1.
So that probably leaves two receiving touchdowns for Cook and Murray, or 2 or 3.
I think Rudolph had 8 last year, which I think was his career year. And he'll be very productive again as long as he stays healthy. He's a very smart receiver, very cerebral, as you like to say. Knows how to. He moves the chains. I think he's very aware where the first down marker is, and he knows how to sit in the zone to make himself available. So I do like Rudolph and Bradford as a connection. They'll be rock solid again this year. And I'm more, that touchdown from Morgan, I'm more so hoping happens because I think he deserves it. But I think, the tight end position, Rudolph was kind of an underrated producer last year as far as the grand scheme of the NFL. I think he'll continue to be that as well.
Yeah. All right, let's move into receiving yards now. Tight ends generally aren't, guys that put up a ton of receiving yards. We've seen Jimmy Graham go over 1,000. I think Gronk has gone over 1,000 a couple of times. But generally speaking, your max for tight ends is going to be about 750 to 800 yards. I think that probably combined, we said 25 touchdowns for Bradford, hypothetically. Let's say about 4,100 yards passing, hypothetically. How many of those receiving yards go to the tight ends this year? We know that Sam Bradford loves Kyle Rudolph, especially as a guy that he can just a blanket, a safety net. He's been great on third downs for the Vikings. Like I said, 4,100 yards. If we just gave about 2,500 of those to the receivers, probably about 500-ish, 300 to 500-ish to the running backs. I mean, what does that leave for to the tight ends?
I'll go, something 800 to 900 yards is about right to me because I think the running backs get a little bit more than your mark, the 500 or whatever you said. I mean, it's going to be similar to last year, I think, for Rudolph. The offense is really, from the passing game standpoint, it's not that much different from what we saw like the second half of last season.
Right.
It's going to be Pat Shurmur. The quick hitting passes, get the ball out quick. Bradford's going to be relatively, similar in performance, and Rudolph's role will be similar. They'll just have a little bit more installed, and hopefully more opportunities. So, overall, I think expect similar production from Rudolph this season, and then hopefully a little bit more from David Morgan if he stays healthy.
All right, so on to the offensive line now. Obviously, the offensive line, their, quote, numbers are typically a reflection of the running game and the passing game.
Yeah.
So there isn't a whole lot to work with here in terms of projecting numbers for the offensive line. I'm in the process right now of trying to figure out how many sacks the Vikings allowed last season.
I don't think it was a lot, though, because a lot of it was just pure the pressure Bradford faced, and he was getting the second half of the year he got the ball out so quick on every play where he checked down quickly. So I don't think the sack numbers were high, but the pressure is given up in the hurries, and the estimated time was very small. So I think that was more the issue last season, at least in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, pressure, we've talked about the concrete feet, not being able to step up in the pocket, that type of stuff that Sam Bradford deals with, and obviously pressure is going to bring that to the front, right? If you're facing pressure all the time and you've got happy feet in the pocket and you're not stepping up well, you're not, I guess gauging or being aware of the pressure around you, that's going to influence those numbers here. So I'm trying to find the actual sack total here. But, I mean, point being, the Vikings obviously horrible, like legendary level horrible of an offensive line last year. They really, really cannot be worse. Like
no, they can't.
I truly don't believe it's possible. I mean, so much would have to happen. I guess don't put it past the Vikings, but let's see here. The Vikings last year, I finally got this pulled up now. The Vikings allowed 38 sacks last year. So what we'll do here is let's say over under 38 for this season.
I'm going to go under, and I think it's
how
going to be
far
substantially
under?
under. I'll go 30. But just because I think, a lot of those sacks, I don't know the number specifically right now, but I feel like over half by far were during Norv Turner's tenure. Because just that's the way the offense is set up. Long, it's 5-7-step drops. With a poor offensive line, just never made sense. And that's why Teddy had 40-something, I think 45 in 2015. So expect lower sack numbers, but I think the pressures will be there. I'm looking at Mike Remmers when I say this. But I think it's important to remember, too, this offensive line of Reef, Easton, Elfline, Berger, and Remmers has not played a snap together in a game. Because of the new additions, we had Boone just get cut, and now Easton kind of slides in with the starters. They have not played together. And so establishing that continuity will be important. And I'm assuming it'll be a slow start for that group, but hopefully if they stay healthy, they can gel together and, be a respectable, serviceable unit for this offense.
So to add a little bit of perspective to the numbers that Drew just broke down, he said right around 30 sacks for the Vikings offensive line this year. That last season, 30 sacks would have put the Vikings at number 23. So if you go in reverse, about ninth best overall.
Okay.
It
sounds ambitious, but I think
it's
more about the scheme.
The disparity is not that great, though. So, for example, the Vikings last year had the 10th most sacks allowed at 38, but 8 sacks is the number between 10th and 23rd, right? So it sounds ambitious, but if you put context to it, I don't think it's as ambitious as like you were saying, Drew. I don't think it's that hot of a take to suggest the Vikings improve by about 8 sacks. To add some more perspective here, Cleveland allowed 66 last year. Right?
That's so many.
That's 17 more than the next highest, which was the Rams at 49.
With Joe Thomas on the roster, playing every game.
Joe Thomas on the roster, yeah. So that speaks to the fact that people never like to blame quarterbacks for sacks. But I think Cleveland is probably a great example last year of a rookie quarterback that wasn't really handling pressure very well, probably taking too many sacks. Probably the same type of thing can be said for Sam Bradford as well.
Good luck to Sean Kaiser.
Good luck to Sean Kaiser. Yep. All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the football. This should be fun. This could be, I don't want to hype it up too much, but I really do think that this defense is going to be. I think this defense has the potential.
This is the year they take the step like the 2015 Broncos?
I think it has to be if it's going to happen, right? We're starting to get into the meat of our primary
the window.
The window, in my opinion, opened last year for the Vikings Super Bowl. The window for this Vikings defense in terms of being top 1, top 2, top 3 might have opened last year as well. But you're starting to see guys like Harrison Smith and Xavier Rhodes hit their prime. Obviously, they're just starting their second contract. That's typically about when the prime starts. Everson Griffin is getting very close to being over the hump. I know nobody wants to hear that, but Everson Griffin he's entered the latter stages of his career.
Yes.
So Linval Joseph, same thing can be said about him. I mean, let's keep in mind, he played, 4 years in New York before he came to Minnesota. He's not a young chicken as well.
I believe did he win a ring with the Giants?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He playoff experience with Linval Joseph for sure. So let's start with the defensive line. How many sacks does the combination of just Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter, and we'll throw Brian Robinson in there, defensive ends as a whole, Deshaun Bauer and Stephen Weatherly as well. How many sacks?
As a whole, okay.
Yeah. How many sacks do they produce this season?
Let's see. I'm gonna say 29. I'll go 29. I'll just keep it just under 30. But I think the Danielle Hunter numbers are being a bit overblown. Putting expectations that high on a dude that's 22 years old. And sure, he's been producing at an astronomical level coming off the bench. But to put those expectations on him is unfair. So I think he'll get double digits. He'll probably have 12 to 13 sacks. I think Everson Griffin will do something along those lines. Maybe 10 sacks, and then I think you'll get those rotational guys in there that put up some numbers between Robinson and Bauer and Weatherly. Maybe not so much Weatherly, but I think Bauer and Robinson will have a pretty big role as well. So, but yeah, I think just under 30 sacks for the defensive ends. I think that's pretty good.
Let's add a little bit more perspective here. Last year, the team that had the most sacks, obviously not just defensive ends, but just as in whole, was Arizona with 48. The Vikings finished fifth at 41. I think through 5 weeks, the Vikings were on some crazy pace for sacks. Like something.
How many times they sacked Cam Newton in week 3? It was like 9 or 10. It was something
seriously
like that.
6 or 7 or like 8 or something like that. And obviously
Griffin himself had 3.5.
And then Danielle Hunter had 1. I think Linval had 1. So
Harrison Smith had 1.
Harrison Smith had 1.
I think Linval had 1.
Yeah, so that would be about 5 or 6. Regardless, a lot of sacks. I think. Okay, I do think that. I think that Danielle Hunter has the potential to do the things that people are saying he's going to do. But the pessimist in me just says, look, he's still really young. He's 4 or 5 years away from his prime. To suggest that he's going to break J.J. Watt's record this season, that's clickbait in my opinion. I just don't think that anytime you go extreme with your predictions, you're just asking for people to throw shit at your take. You know, if you say that a team's going to go 16-0, I mean,
well, here's the thing.
Everyone's going to say no.
The take is popular it's very popular among Vikings fans.
Well, not just us though. It's getting to the national level too.
People jumped on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
Seeing the production, they try and, it's almost like the per 36 minute stats in NBA. You get a guy like Shabazz Muhammad, who he puts up like 24 points per 36 minutes, but it's because he plays for 13 minutes a game and shoots every single time he gets the ball. So it's a type of thing where Hunter, when he's on the field, he's been in pass rushing situations, so his pressures per snap are high inherently.
Right.
So in a full-time role, that number will go down, and his sacks won't see the jump that I think people think will happen.
I think that the number for Danielle Hunter this year is probably 15 or 16. I think that if you're going to set the over/under, probably set it around 13.5. In which case
That's pretty good. I like that.
In which case I would go over. I think that conversely, Everson Griffin will be lower than that 13.5 number.
Yeah.
I could see Everson Griffin getting to double digits again, but I think probably 11 or 12 is about his high. I mean, as good of a pass rusher as Griffin is, his strength really is in run defense. That's kind of what's made him, a very well-rounded and just extremely talented player, is how well he stops the run. The pass rushing is more a benefit, in my opinion, to his game. Between those two alone, I could see about 28, and then I'll give Robinson, Weatherly, and Bauer, I'll give them 4 combined. So I'm going to say 32 sacks from the defensive ends this year, which leaves about 10 or so for the linebacking group, and obviously Linval Joseph and probably Jaleel Johnson will be mixing in a few sacks as well.
And Tom Johnson.
Yeah. So let's move into that defensive tackle group. A lot of names there, a lot of guys that could produce a lot or produce nothing. I mean, we could see Jaleel Johnson break onto the scene and have a Geno Atkins type year and, compile about 4.5, 5.5 sacks as an under tackle. He's got that talent. Or he could sit the entire season behind Tom Johnson. As the Vikings, quote, groom him for the future. I think that Linval, obviously, as a clogger, not a guy that's going to rack up a ton of sacks, maybe 2, 3, 4. I think as a whole, you're probably looking at about 8 sacks from the defensive tackle unit.
I mean, it's so tough to predict sacks from this position. Because obviously it's Linval Joseph's job to get a sack when he can, but it's not what it's not his role. Expected to do in the role. He's expected to eat up space, eat up blockers, make things easier for Hunter, for Griffin, for these other guys. So it's tough to predict that. I don't even want to put a number on that just because of how unique that role is. But I think Tom Johnson could make a splash if he stays young, which is obviously that's kind of a weird thing to say, but if he
it makes sense though. If
he keeps his 2015 form, we'll say, when he filled in for Sharif Floyd and was a pretty solid pass rusher. So I do like Jaleel Johnson though to kind of come onto the scene in a situational role and make some plays too. So, but I'm not going to put the number on that just because I don't think with that role, it's just so hard to judge.
since, like you said, since defensive tackle, their primary role is to eat up space and then obviously provide interior pressure, but not necessarily get the sack numbers. I feel like tackle for loss is probably a better number there.
Probably.
But I think that the real thing that needs to improve from that defensive front is their ability to stop the run. Obviously, that's it's been a huge issue for far too long now, just simply allowing those 8 and 10 yard chunk carries from guys like Jordan Howard, who you expect your defensive line to probably stop. So the Vikings defense last year, in terms of rushing yards allowed, to give some perspective once again here, they ranked at number 20 at 1,700 rushing yards allowed, 4.2 yards per attempt, which is not good. So the question I have off of that, the Vikings improve their run defense this year? Do they get worse, or are we looking probably at about the same with a shutdown secondary once again?
I say a slight improvement, and I like that just because I like Ben Gideon to kind of really help that out as a third linebacker. That's kind of where he excels. And then I also like Jaleel Johnson as a run stuffer we saw in preseason. Again, small sample size, and you're looking, but in the preseason you're looking for the traits and individual players, and you saw that from Jaleel Johnson, a guy that can really shoot the gaps really well. He's got that great burst out the line. He has tremendous finesse moves with his hands to swat guys away and give himself a lane into the backfield. So I like the Vikings to improve there. It kind of depends too on how much run Jaleel gets versus Tom as that 3 tech. Because if it's Tom Johnson, I think that's where the Vikings could get exposed. But they have to. I think it seems like these big plays is what really handicapped the Vikings rush defense last season. The Jordan Howard play obviously comes to mind.
Well, think about how Rob Kelly ran through the Vikings too against Washington. I mean, that kind of gets overlooked because it's Fat Rob. I mean, nobody thinks of him as being a great running back, but he was plowing forward for good carries all game long last year. And the Vikings were that was a problem. So
it feels like the cutback lanes seem to be kind of where the Vikings get beat. It seems because you get the guys like Griffin and Joseph and Hunter even too that set the edge well. And then these running backs see the cutback lanes, and it's the linebackers are late or the safety is late and taking poor angles, and that's where the Vikings get beat. So maybe, I mean, I think that's
a great point.
From what I remember
really do.
Watching, I watched games, a few times each last year, but it seemed like that's kind of where the Vikings were getting beat against the run.
I think that's an elite take, honestly. I think that's one of the better takes that you've had on the show, simply because I think that people don't think about the cutback as being a major factor in terms of the volume numbers that come out of counter runs, cutback runs, guys that are, like you said, get to the edge and then see that it's sealed off by Everson Griffin and cut back over the middle. We saw Anthony Barr miss a ton of tackles last year. Eric Kendricks was, very good.
He got aggressive sometimes,
but he missed a couple times. We actually saw Harrison Smith miss a lot more tackles last year than I thought that, at least more tackles than we had become accustomed to. And Anderson Dejo, as much as he has improved his run defense and not tackling with his head down, he still does get a little impulsive at times. So I think that's a really good point about the cutback runs. It's something that really does need to improve. And honestly,
I'm going to look for that now too. I think it's
probably something worth investing time on if you're someone that's into the analytics. I think that's not a statistic that's available. That's something that you'd really have to grind to figure out cutback yards. But that's an issue for the Vikings and probably something that we should be delving into, maybe a little bit more as we kind of see what happens this season. So let's move on to the linebacker position now. I hate using tackles as a way
I
to.
I don't like it.
It's stupid. Yeah, it's just plain stupid. All that tells you is that the guy is around the ball a lot. I mean, why is it always the same positions that lead the league in tackles? It's always it's always inside linebackers. Always. Every year. So we're not going to use tackles as an evaluative stat. I think the best way to do this is to just kind of, I don't think that there's an actual statistic four linebackers that's really representative of their overall game, because Anthony Barr is asked to do so many different things, right? He's asked to cover, he's asked to pass rush, he's asked to set the edge at times. I mean, there's so many different things that all these guys do, and because the Vikings do run a multiple front defense, sometimes they'll line up with three guys in the line of scrimmage and have someone with their hand in the dirt, that kind of thing. It's very difficult to use a statistical evaluation to project performance for the linebacker position. So, let's do it like this: Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr. Are both of these guys going to improve this season? Are both of these guys going to kind of stay neutral? Are we going to see a drop off? Is it going to be? Is their overall projection from the eye test standpoint? Are they going to be a better duo this year than last year, or are they going to stay the same or get worse?
Well, I'm expecting the bounce back year from Anthony Barr. From all accounts,
yes,
and even what we saw too at training camp and some in preseason, especially that Buffalo game, I thought he was really good. So it looks like he has regained some of, or at least glimpses of, that 2015 form that we came to know and love. So I expect a bounce back season from him. I think Kendricks, obviously, he's on the up and up, I guess you could say, for his career. I would assume he's still he's not reached his prime yet, so I would assume more improvement there, more development in his traits. So I mean, I don't see any reason why this group would get worse or even stay the same. I would really expect further development, further really elite, almost nearly elite play as far as a duo. I mean, you don't get many duos of that caliber, so I like that. Completely on board with everything you're saying here. I think that this is going to be the year that we finally see those two Bruins finally, kind of come together and realize their potential as, like you said, like a duo. Obviously, in 2015, Anthony Barr kind of carried the load at the linebackers position. Last year, it was probably Eric Kendricks. This year, I think it's going to be a consistent front-to-back performance for both guys. This is a deal-breaker position for me. If Anthony Barr can cover running backs better out of the backfield and be at least in better positions against tight ends, this team is going to improve a ton. And if you cover up that tight end flaw, this defense goes from having, a couple of holes to maybe one if you cover up the tight end issue. So, and I expect that to happen. So I'm really excited about this linebacker group. Let's finish up with defensive backs as a whole here, because, again, I don't like using interceptions as the number. Obviously, interception totals tends to be what gets you on the NFL top 100, but it's more about pass defense, being in good position, efficiency as a tackler. There's so many different things that these guys all run, so I'm going to use the same style of predictive evaluation that we just used for linebackers here. Do you expect Xavier Rhodes to take that next step as an elite cornerback? Do you expect him to stay the same, or do you expect him to, get worse? Well, he's going to get a lot of stiff tests, even right away this season. I mean, his first three games are Michael Thomas, Antonio Brown, Mike Evans. So that's three of the top borderline top 10 receivers if you count Thomas in there. But otherwise, Evans and Brown are two of the top four, undoubtedly. So
that's three of the top 7 or 8.
Yeah. So you're going to get a real chance to see how he stands up against the elite of the elite. So, but I think he can take that next step as, like a true, when Sherman was in his prime, the guy, he was the guy. That was the top cornerback. Because, say what you want about Pro Football Focus, but they put together objective stats too, just straight up stats, not get grades or anything. And he was near the top of all of those, whether it was, opposing wide receiver rating, which is their basically their passer rating given up by a cornerback. I think he was number one in the league by, a certain number of snaps played. He's also the best run defender that they even graded. So, and then I think yards allowed per coverage snap was lowest in the league too. So many of these numbers, they show Xavier Rhodes as the best cornerback in the league. So now he gets to play the real talent between Brown, Evans, and all these guys right away.
Brown
Yeah.
is really going to be that true test because
if he moves in the slot too, that'll be interesting.
Exactly.
Too, so.
I was just going to say we've seen Rhodes used more in the slot as a true shadow corner. That's something that at least me, I think that you'll probably agree with me here. I'm skeptical of his ability to cover out of the slot, just because he hasn't ever been great at it. Where he's been,
And that
elite.
is where the Steelers scare me.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
You know how I feel about that slot position.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, dude. If you put, we'll be talking about this week 2, obviously, but just think about the way they could line up their receivers there.
It's not just Brown too. It's Eli Rogers. It's Martavis Bryant. They have a bunch of guys that can.
Bryant. Well, I mean, just think about it. You put Bryant on the outside. You put Antonio Brown in the slot as a mismatch, and then you just throw out whoever the hell else you got out there, Juju Smith-Schuster, and have him run a 9 on the outside.
True.
I mean, and then obviously you got Le'Veon Bell too. That's gonna be a fun week to talk about football for sure. But we'll get back into the Steelers in a couple weeks here. Like I said, talked about Xavier Rhodes. Let's talk about his counterparts now: Mackenzie Alexander, Terrence Newman, Trey Waynes. What do you think overall? Give me a grade: A, B, C, D, E. No E. A, B, C, D, F for that trio in terms of overall performance. What do you think?
For what, Rhodes?
No, not Rhodes. Rhodes excluded. We're talking Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, Terrence Newman. I mean, if you want to throw Marcus Sherrills in there too, you can. Tremaine Brock, I guess, as well.
I'm thinking like a C right now.
Yeah,
because
I do too.
I think Newman, I mean, the age thing is obviously a concern, and we've kind of seen some glimpses of that so far in the preseason. I think Trey Waynes will be a fine cornerback too, not, nothing better than that, nothing worse than that. He'll be a serviceable second cornerback, and then I think Mackenzie Alexander, he won't see the field much this year, to be honest.
He's in trouble. He's in trouble.
Yeah. I'm not high on him anymore. I mean, I guess I never really was, but
his career is at the same crossroads as Treadwell's now. All of a sudden.
Yeah, it is. I mean, bringing in a guy Tremaine Brock, who actually, he's played 95% of his snaps outside, but they're bringing him in to play the slot.
Yeah, which he's been good at as well.
So that move tells me quite a bit about where the Vikings see Mackenzie Alexander, and I'm not optimistic about his career.
I mean, just think about how crazy that is. Sandwiching the 2015 draft class, which might be, it's probably Rick Spielman's greatest of all time in his career as an upper management executive. This season it appears to be a very, very fine work as well. And then in the middle, you've got potentially 2 busts in the first 2 picks in Mackenzie Alexander and Treadwell.
He had Mobo in the 6th round.
might be the worst draft of his career. So, safeties. Andrew Sendejo and Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith is he going to finally get the recognition that he deserves this year? Andrew Sendejo going to play the same way he's always played? What are your expectations for this position?
Harrison Smith won't get the recognition because that's just how his personality is, and playing in Minnesota, he just never will. But he's still a top 3 safety in the NFL, if not the top.
He's the greatest. He's the
and
best.
then you have Andrew Sendejo will be fine. I think he's really toned down the over aggressiveness in coverage, both in coverage and shooting the gaps against the run. So he'll be fine. Smith will be really, really good, as always. I think Antoine Exum will have a role, though, whether it's rotating in with a nickel or adding in some safety reps, whatever it is. But I'll also add that I think Terrence Newman could see some time at safety, too. We saw that at camp. He's a really good zone coverage player. I think he could move him in there in the event of an injury. If it's Sendejo or if it's Smith, I think they would use a combination of Exum and Newman to kind of fill that role.
Okay, I agree with you. I think that Harrison Smith is going to be elite once again. I think that he'll continue to prove that he probably is the best safety, at least the most versatile safety in the NFL, and he's going to continue to not get the recognition that he deserves. And then obviously Andrew Sendejo is going to be serviceable. That's what he is. That's the player he is, and honestly, that's good enough for me when you're playing opposite. Like I said, arguably the best safety in the NFL. So from there, I want you to give me how many Pro Bowlers. I don't want to say All Pro because that's
okay. I like this.
I think that All Pro is so media biased that you see guys like, for example, like the Terrell Owenses of the world not getting votes just because they're disliked.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use Pro Bowls here, despite it being also a pretty ineffective. You know what I mean. So how many Pro Bowlers are the Vikings going to have this year, both offense and defense, and who are they going to be?
Let's see. I think I think Sam Bradford makes it because of I think the team does better. I think the offense his perception of his performance will be better. I think he squeaks in by how many players that choose not to play or whatever it is. I think Adam Thielen could, but I don't think he will. So I think Bradford will be your only offensive player, and then on defense I'll go Hunter. I'll go Griffin. I'll go Smith. I think Kendricks will get in, and I think Linval will also get in. So I don't know how many that is, but it was a lot. I think I'm setting the bar high.
I'm right there with you. I've got Daniil, Linval, Everson, Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith, and Xavier Rhodes, all from the defense.
Oh, I didn't even say Rhodes. Yeah, I should probably say Rhodes first of all. But
so that means Harrison Smith, Xavier Rhodes, Anthony Barr, Linval Joseph. I'll say just one defensive end because it's rare that they pick two of the same position from each team. So I'm going to say 6 defensive Pro Bowlers. I think this is what it makes it, right?
That's unreal.
I've got that right?
That's probably that. There's no way that's happened before, right?
Not in my memory.
Rhodes,
Linval,
Kendricks,
Barr, Daniil, Rhodes, Smith. That's 5. So 5 defensive Pro Bowlers. You could arguably say Everson Griffin.
How many made it last year? You had Griffin.
4.
Oh, it was just Hunter. You're adding Hunter.
Yeah,
which is
pretty much.
That's totally understandable.
Right,
so
it's fair. Then on the offensive side of the football, I think that Sam Bradford could be a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, how many quarterbacks are going to drop out of the Pro Bowl? So
probably several.
Yeah, I could see the Vikings having 6 or 7 Pro Bowlers this year. Which, if you're not optimistic about the season yet, just think about that. That's 6 or 7 of your starting 22 of your 27 contributors. You could also make a case for Marcus Sherrills probably being a Pro Bowler as a punt returner as well. Vikings have a lot of talent on their roster. I'm not going to argue that with anybody. They have so much talent. It's just a matter of realizing it and executing it. So we said we were going to talk about kind of the NFL overall standings. We're running low on time here, so let's do a briefer here. Give me your NFC top 6. So so NFC North, NFC South, East, West. Your champion, and then your 2 wild card teams. We'll save AFC for another time, just because the NFC is what's relevant here.
NFC, I like Seattle as a number 1 seed, just because their offensive line. I think Austin mentioned this too in our roundtable.
Awful.
Their offensive line is really bad. We know how mobile Russell Wilson is. We know all the talent he has around him there. I think you brought in Eddie Lacy. You brought in and then you have Thomas Rawls, whose health is still an issue there. But you have Doug Baldwin at the receiver. You have Jimmy Graham at tight end still. And then defensively, look at all these guys they brought in. They brought Sheldon Richardson in. So you have all kinds of talent on Seattle's defense. I still think they're the top team. I have Green Bay getting the first round bye, the 2 seed. And Dallas is my 3 seed. 4 seed, I'll go Tampa Bay. I think Atlanta takes a step back. I like Tampa Bay to move up quite a bit.
I'm okay with that, yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll give Atlanta the 5 seed. I think they take a big step back without Shanahan, but they do have a lot of talent on that roster, so they still make it. And then I'll squeak the Vikings down as the 6th seed. So what you'd get then is a matchup of Dallas and. So
you're counting the New York Giants out then?
I am.
Okay.
Which I don't like. I don't like doing that.
I don't like that either. Yeah. I go back and forth on who's going to win the NFC North. I keep saying the Vikings, but I'm not. I'd be lying to you if I said that I don't think the Packers are probably still the favorite. I think it's a little bit bold to suggest the Vikings will win the North. So I'm going to stick with that gut feeling that the Vikings are going to win the North. I think that they would be probably the 3 or the 4 seed then, because Seattle's up top. I completely agree with you. I think that's a team that could win 12, 13, 14 games this year. Dallas, I think is going to take a step back, but I think that they're still going to be very competitive, and they're going to win that division as well, even without Ezekiel Elliott. I think that, dude, I don't know. That's tough.
Giants are intriguing. I give you that. Yeah. I'm going to kick myself for not having them in my top 6 probably.
I'm going to pick Dallas to win the East, but I'm not very confident in that. So take that with a grain of salt. Then out west, another extremely intriguing division. I'm going to say that Seattle is going to be the top seed, but I think that Arizona is going to make it as well somehow. So that's going to put Seattle number 1, Dallas. I'll say Dallas is number 2. Vikings are another number 3. I'll put Atlanta as the number 4. They win the South. Then my 2 wild card teams will be the Giants and the Cardinals. And I'll say that since the Giants always suck during the regular season for some reason, I'll say they're the 6th seed. The Cardinals are the 5 seed.
So you're keeping the Green Bay Packers out of the playoffs.
I think that it's either Green Bay, Minnesota. 2 of Green Bay, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay are going to miss the playoffs. 2 of those teams are going to miss the postseason, right? Because well, I guess if you want to put in Atlanta as well, it would be 2 of those 4 teams are going to miss the postseason. The way that I see Green Bay potentially getting in, and the more we talk about it, I'm less and less confident about Dallas. They're such a strong candidate to take there's so many reasons for them to take a step back, right? Zeke's going to be missing a ton of time.
Their defense is a concern. And
Dak is a sophomore. Sophomore slump is the most real thing in sports.
I don't believe in it. But
I don't believe in their secondary. Their offensive line is really, if you're going to fall back on something, that's probably a great thing to fall back on because it allows for them to be good regardless of who's setting up behind them to some degree. I really like the Giants, though. Honestly, it's going to be I think it's going to be whoever wins the North makes the postseason because I do think Arizona is that good, and I really think that Tampa Bay is going to be competitive as well. Dude, it's stacked. The NFC is there are probably 2 or 3 teams in every single division that could win the division.
Well, yeah, and let's look at the AFC now because let's just do it quick because I don't know.
Patriots are up top. We'll do it. Let's do this together. Patriots are up top.
Yep.
Steelers. I'm going to say Steelers
probably still. Yep. Yeah.
So if Patriots are 14-2 or 13-3, Steelers are 12-4, 11-5.
Then you probably have KC again.
Kansas City or Oakland. I like Derek Carr a lot.
Yeah. I'll put Oakland 3. Yep. I'll put KC 5. And then which other division we got? Oh, the AFC South.
Yeah, the worst division in football. I've got Tennessee there.
That's gonna be Tennessee is gonna be all right.
Andrew Luck is hurt. Houston. Oh man, dude. Betting against a Hurricane team though, I don't like that. Houston.
Give him the wild card. That's fine.
I think Houston could be. I think
quarterback first.
Houston has enough talent to do exactly what New Orleans did in 2009. They obviously don't have the Hall of Fame quarterback.
No, they don't.
Come on now. Yes, they do.
They don't have Hall of Fame quarterbacks, but they don't have.
Sure, but
if Savage.
But they have an elite defense. They've got a ton of playmakers on offense. So if Deshaun Watson comes in and does something relatively similar to Dak in terms of game management style, that's a team that
they're not even starting him.
I know, but don't you expect Watson to be in there at some point this year?
Well, if he is, they're not winning games.
That's also true. I'm going to pick Tennessee to win the South regardless because I think Tennessee.
Same.
I really think that Tennessee their Super Bowl window opens this year. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'm saying their Super Bowl window opens this season. And since we just broke down both the AFC and the NFC, give me your Super Bowl champion, your matchup for this year. Who you got?
I have to put New England in the AFC.
I do too. Steelers maybe. Pittsburgh.
No.
Yeah.
New England's going to win the AFC. It's just the best bet. It's the best bet. They've done it how many times in the last 15 years?
Every year.
Out of the NFC,
Seattle. Are we going to get a rematch? Seattle.
Part of me thinks. Well,
let's think about this for a second here. Who are the actual Super Bowl contenders in the NFC? You have to put Atlanta in there because they were there last year.
No, you don't.
Well, they got better. On paper than they were last year, and they were a Super Bowl team last year. So you got to put them there. You got to put Aaron Rodgers there because he's an elite quarterback.
Thank you.
He's always going to be a threat to win the Super Bowl. That's why Green Bay has irrational expectations every single year. You also have to put Seattle in there because obviously Russell Wilson's a Super Bowl winner. They're seemingly there every year as well. I think that New York It's probably It's probably a solid dark horse favorite.
I don't hate that as a wild card team that makes a run because they do that every time. Okay.
Eli gets hot. That defense, Janoris Jenkins and
here's what's going to happen. We're going to get the 12 versus 12 matchup at US Bank Stadium. I'm going to hate it because I despise both the franchises, but we're going to get Tom Brady versus Aaron Rodgers at US Bank Stadium, and it's going to be glorious.
You think it's going to be Tom? You think it's going to be Tom?
Tom's going to win.
Glorious. Are you saying glorious as in Tom Brady's going to just make,
Well, no.
Or are you saying glorious as in like a great football game?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But I only say that because I obviously think very highly of Aaron Rodgers, and the Patriots are still the Patriots. And
right.
So
I'll pick something different. So you're going Patriots Packers. I'll say Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Giants. Pittsburgh wins. Mike Tomlin.
That could be fun.
Ben Roethlisberger establishes himself as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time this year by winning his third ring. So
interesting.
All right, there it is. So I believe that is the end of our show today. We missed the bold.
Let's fire up some hot takes quick.
Okay, let's fire up the hot takes real quick.
I got a couple right here. Number one, Laquan Treadwell has more catches than he did in 2016.
Yep.
Spicy one, right?
Yep.
But my next one is actually a hot take, and it's Jarius Wright gets traded by the trade deadline.
Is that hot? Or is that just
I'm maybe. And then my other ones obviously were Thielen, 1,200 receiving yards, and then Bradford making the Pro Bowl by whatever way you want to think that. But I think Jarius Wright gets traded because they kept 6 receivers. Floyd's going to come back, and I think instead of getting rid of Rodney Adams, they're going to do what they can to get rid of Jarius Wright via trade.
I'm fine with all that. I'll start with the one that I said on the round table as well. 1,500 all-purpose yards for Dalvin Cook, so about 1,200 rushing yards, 300 receiving yards. In my opinion, that pretty much locks him in as the offensive rookie of the year. So you can just throw that onto the flames of that hot take. Secondly, I'm going to say that Michael Floyd could these are fire takes. These are not necessarily things I believe. These are things that I think could happen. Michael Floyd takes over as the number 1 receiver at some point this season.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That's a lot of ground to hop over.
I don't hate it.
He's got the potential to do it. It's one of those things where a lot has to go right for that to happen. Not even a lot has to go right. A lot of things have to happen for that to become reality, but I'll say it just because I really believe in his talent. So, and my third and final one, I'm going to say this is the number 1 defense in the NFL in terms of total yardage allowed, right? So, this is going to be the best defense in terms of keeping the offense off the field, basically, limiting the damage. This is going to be a very, 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 very good defense, and I'll throw this one in there too. The defensive line rivals the Purple People Eaters in terms of overall production. I think that this is the best group. That includes. Think about the defensive lines we've had in the past.
Jared Allen, Williams Wall, Ray Edwards.
Yep, that wall is pretty much the best defensive line we've seen probably since the Purple People Eaters. Unless I'm missing something, and I think that this front four has the potential to be better than both of them. So we'll see what happens and all that. Obviously, these are hot takes. Don't take us too seriously. They're supposed to be more for fun. But, I understand if you want to get mad at some of that stuff. We were, a little bit outrageous there. So thanks, as always, for joining us. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Vikings Territory, iHeartRadio, YouTube. You know where to find us. Always, we'll be back later on this week on Friday with our preview show for the New Orleans Saints game on Monday, and we'll also have, I don't know if it's going to, we wanted to do the film analysis video show tomorrow, but it's not looking good, so that might get put on the back burner until next week, but regardless, we will be doing that pregame show that we mentioned on Monday, and also the post-game show for the VT Roundtable. So Monday should be a stacked day for Vikings football. Should be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to the season. So next time we talk to you guys, we'll be talking Saints-Vikings, and we'll catch up with you guys later on Friday. Thanks as always for listening to the show, and we'll catch you guys later.